Dean Castellano sat on a filthy office floor at 3 a.m., his $10,000 suit collecting dust, waiting for his janitor to finish her shift because 2 hours ago, he'd discovered the woman he was obsessed with had been lying to him for 6 months. She wasn't coming home late because of another man. She was drowning in a $50,000 debt to predators in his own organization, working herself to death in secret, and he'd just made a call that would either save her life or destroy everything between them. But this story didn't start on that floor. It started hours earlier, when the penthouse was silent and the city outside Dean's windows was not. When he didn't hear the distant sirens or the hum of traffic 40 floors below. When he heard only one thing, the ticking of the clock that told him she was late again. 2:47 a.m. He stood in the dim light of his living room, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a glass of bourbon untouched on the marble counter. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the glittering skyline, but his eyes weren't on the view. They were locked on the elevator doors at the far end of the hall. He shouldn't have cared. He shouldn't have been awake. He shouldn't have been this wound up over someone who worked for him. But Willow Hayes wasn't just someone. She had a quiet strength that unsettled him, a way of meeting his eyes like she refused to be intimidated, a softness beneath the defiance he hadn't seen in years. And 3 nights ago, he had caught her in the hallway with Reese, his capo, his most trusted man. They were standing too close, laughing too easily. Reese had leaned in to whisper something, and she had smiled that rare, genuine smile she almost never gave Dean. Dean had watched for 10 seconds. It bothered him for hours. He took a breath, jaw tightening. She lived here. She worked here. She was safe, because she was under his roof. But lately, she wasn't under his roof. Not at the hours she should be. He had been telling himself for weeks that it wasn't jealousy. But what he didn't know was that someone was watching. Tonight, he knew he had been lying. The elevator dinged. Dean didn't move. He stayed in the shadow between the windows and the hallway, watching as the doors slid open. If you've ever cared about someone so deeply it terrified you, if you've ever waited in the dark wondering if they're safe or if they're slipping away, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button right now and comment where you're watching from. We're building a family of people who know what it means to love someone dangerously. She stepped out. Willow Hayes looked like a woman returning from a life he was never invited to. Her cleaning uniform was wrinkled and damp at the shoulders, hair pulled into a messy bun with loose strands framing her exhausted face, sneakers scuffed and worn. Her eyes were shadowed with fatigue, her shoulders carrying weight he couldn't see. Her gaze found his in the darkness. She froze. "Damn it," she whispered. He stepped out of the shadows slowly, voice deep and low. "Is this your idea of a time to come home?" Her breath caught. "Why are you lurking in the dark like some kind of villain?" "You scared me." "I wasn't lurking," he said. "I was waiting." She blinked hard, setting down her bag. "You were waiting for me?" "I asked you a question, Willow," Dean replied, ignoring hers. "Do you call this an hour to walk into my house?" "My shift ended at midnight," she said defensively. "I had things to take care of. I have a life outside this penthouse, you know." He took a slow step toward her. She instinctively stepped back until her shoulder met the cold elevator frame. "What things?" he asked quietly. "With Reese?" Her eyes faltered for half a second. There was one detail everyone missed. Half a second too long. Dean's jaw clenched. "Unbelievable. We work in the same building," she rushed out. "He checks in sometimes. We talk. It's called being cordial." "At 3 in the morning?" he asked, his voice dropping dangerously low. "I wasn't with Reese tonight," she snapped. "And even if I was, that's none of your business." "So you were with someone. So you're insane," she shot back. "You sign my paycheck. You don't own my nights." He stepped closer. Too close. Her breath stilled. "You live in my house," he said, voice rough. "Under my protection. And when you walk in at this hour, exhausted, barely standing, yes, I care where you've been." She didn't expect that answer. Not from him. "You care?" she said softly, something vulnerable flickering in her eyes. He swallowed once, hard. "I care about the people in my employ," he corrected. "That's all." "Right." Her voice dropped, wounded. "Just business." Something flickered in his eyes, hurt, frustration, jealousy, all tangled together. For once, he wasn't thinking like a boss, but like a man about to lose everything. She couldn't tell which. He lifted a hand slowly, his thumb brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheekbone. "You're exhausted," he said quietly. What are you doing to yourself? Her breath stopped completely. I'm fine, she whispered. It's nothing you need to worry about. His thumb lingered 1 second too long. Go to bed, Willow. No more interrogation? We'll talk in the morning. I don't want more rules, Dean. Then stop making me worry. Her heart tumbled in her chest. You were worried, she whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. It was written in the way he looked at her, tense, tired, relieved now that she was standing in front of him. Good night, he said softly, stepping back to give her space. Good night, Dean, she said, letting his name linger. He inhaled sharply, hands curling into fists at his sides. She walked down the hall in her worn sneakers, the softest sound on the marble. He didn't take his eyes off her until her door closed. Only then did he exhale and press a hand to his forehead. This wasn't normal. This wasn't professional. This wasn't safe. He was jealous. He was worried. And worst of all, he was losing the one person who made this penthouse feel less empty. But this wasn't even the most shocking part. Willow woke with a knot in her stomach. The memory of Dean waiting in the dark replayed in her mind. His voice, his stare, the way he said, "Stop making me worry." She tried not to analyze it. She failed. Downstairs, she prepared coffee with trembling hands. The elevator dinged. She froze. Dean stepped into the kitchen wearing a fresh white shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair still damp from a shower. He looked calm. Too calm. Morning, she said, handing him a mug. Morning. Their fingers brushed. Both pretended not to react. Dean took the coffee without breaking eye contact. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything unsaid. Willow turned back to the counter, busying herself with wiping down surfaces that were already spotless. She could feel his eyes on her back, burning through her like a brand. About last night, Dean started, his voice carefully neutral. You don't need to apologize, she cut in quickly, not turning around. You were worried. I get it. I should have texted. I wasn't going to apologize. His voice was low, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something that made her spine straighten. I was going to ask you again. Where were you? She kept her back to him, her hands stilling on the marble. I told you. I had things to handle. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. She heard him set his mug down with deliberate care. The sound echoed in the quiet kitchen. Willow, look at me. She turned slowly, arms crossed defensively. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. In the morning light, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He hadn't slept either. Are you in some kind of trouble? He asked, and there was genuine fear beneath the question. No. Are you seeing someone? Her breath caught. What? No. Dean. Then what is it? His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his control. Because you're exhausted. You're disappearing at odd hours. You won't answer your phone, and you won't tell me why. Because it's not your problem, she said, her voice breaking on the last word. Everything under this roof is my problem. I'm not a problem to be solved, Dean. I'm a person. I know that, he said, frustration bleeding into his tone. I know you're a person. That's the whole damn issue. If you were just an employee, I could distance myself. I could stop caring. But you're not. You're... The elevator dinged again, cutting him off. That moment, everything in the room changed. They both turned as Reese stepped into the kitchen, his timing impossibly perfect or perfectly terrible. He took one look at the two of them. Dean, tense and radiating barely controlled frustration. Willow backed against the counter with her arms wrapped tight and a slow grin spread across his face. Morning, Reese said cheerfully, heading straight for the coffee pot. Did I interrupt something? Or is this just how you two say good morning now? Reese, Dean warned, his voice dropping to something dangerous. What? Reese poured himself a cup, leaning against the opposite counter with casual ease that felt deliberate. His eyes flickered to Willow with something like amusement and maybe concern. You both look like you got maybe 3 hours of sleep. Rough night? Willow's jaw tightened. I'm fine. She's always fine, Dean muttered darkly, picking up his mug again and gripping it hard enough that Willow worried it might shatter. Reese raised an eyebrow, taking a leisurely sip of coffee. Obsessed much? Dean's head snapped toward him, his entire body going rigid. Excuse me? Just an observation, boss. Reese seemed completely unbothered by the dangerous edge in Dean's voice, which told Willow exactly how long they'd known each other. You've been pacing the penthouse like a caged animal for the past week, checking the security cameras every hour, asking me if I've seen Willow, where she went, when she got back, calling me at 2 a.m. to see if I know where she is." He took another sip. "It's getting a little obvious." Willow's eyes widened, her gaze snapping to Dean. "You've been checking the cameras? Calling Reese about me?" Dean shot Reese a look that could have drawn blood, could have ended careers. "We're done here. Are we?" Reese set his mug down, and his casual demeanor slipped just enough to show he was serious, that he cared about both of them. "Because from where I'm standing, you two need to actually talk instead of dancing around whatever this is. The tension is so thick I could cut it with a knife." "Reese," Dean said, his voice dropping to something cold and commanding. The voice he used in business meetings, in negotiations, when he needed people to remember exactly who he was. "Out. Now." Reese held up his hands in surrender, but his eyes went to Willow one more time. He knew something that no one else in the building did. There was something almost protective in his gaze, a silent message she couldn't quite read but felt in her bones. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything," he said pointedly to her, not to Dean. "Anything at all." Then he was gone, leaving them alone again. The silence was suffocating. Willow could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of Dean's stare. "So," she said quietly, forcing herself to meet his eyes. "You've been checking cameras, asking about me, waiting up at night." She took a shaky breath. "Dean, what is this? What are we doing?" He didn't answer immediately. His hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white with tension. A muscle jumped in his jaw. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw. "I need you to come to my office. Now. Dean, please." The word sounded like it cost him something, like he'd pulled it from somewhere deep and painful. Dean Castellano didn't say please. Not to employees, not to business partners, not to anyone. Willow nodded slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. His next decision would decide whether he lived or died. She followed him down the hall to his private office, a space she'd cleaned 100 times but never truly entered as anything other than staff. The door was heavy, solid wood that probably cost more than her car. He closed it behind them with a soft click that sounded final, and suddenly the air felt thinner, charged with electricity. Dean moved to the window, his back to her. The morning light caught the tension in his shoulders, the rigid set of his spine. He looked like a man preparing for battle, for confession, for something that would change everything. Willow stood in the center of the room on the expensive Persian rug, waiting, barely breathing. The silence stretched. 1 second, 5, 10. "I haven't slept properly in 2 weeks, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, so quiet she almost didn't hear it. "Not since you started coming home late. Not since I realized I had no idea where you were going or who you were with or if you were safe." Her throat tightened. "Dean, let me finish." He still didn't turn around, his hands braced against the window frame like he needed the support. "Please, let me say this before I lose my nerve." She nodded, even though he couldn't see it, and wrapped her arms around herself. "I told myself it was about security," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "About making sure the people in my house were safe. That's what I'm supposed to care about, right? Security, control, making sure everything runs smoothly. But that was a lie." He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke her. "The truth is, I can't stop thinking about you. I can't focus in meetings. I can't make decisions without wondering where you are, if you're okay. I can't function knowing you're out there somewhere, exhausted and struggling with something you won't tell me about." He took a step toward her, then another. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for family. And when you walk in at 3 a.m. looking like you're about to collapse, looking like the weight of the world is crushing you, it takes everything in me not to. He stopped himself, jaw clenching hard enough that she could see the muscle jump. "Not to what?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not to demand you stop whatever it is you're doing. Not to lock you in this penthouse where I know you're safe, where I can see you and know you're okay. Not to—" He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated, desperate. "You're an employee, Willow. I know that. I know the power dynamic. I know I shouldn't care this much. That it's inappropriate and probably a dozen other things. But I do. I care so damn much it's eating me alive." Her heart was racing now, pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. "You care because I work for you." "No." The word came out sharp, almost angry. He closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his presence overwhelming. intoxicating. I care because... His voice dropped, became something raw and honest and terrifying. Because when I see you exhausted and hurting, it feels like something's being ripped out of my chest. Because when Reese stands too close to you, when he makes you laugh, I want to tear him apart even though he's my closest friend. Because you're the first person in years, maybe ever, who's looked at me like I'm just a man, not a monster, not a boss, not a means to an end, just me. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only stare at him as everything she'd been trying to deny, trying to suppress, came crashing to the surface. I want you, he said, and the words were rough and desperate and completely honest. Not as an employee, not as someone I'm responsible for, not as someone who works in my house. I want you, Willow. Your laugh, your stubborn pride, your strength, the way you refuse to back down from me even when everyone else does. And I know I shouldn't. I know this is wrong on about 15 different levels, but I can't. He stopped abruptly, as if realizing what he'd just confessed, what line he'd just crossed. In that moment, the entire balance of power flipped. The mask slammed back into place, his expression shuddering. Forget I said that. What? Forget it. He stepped back, putting distance between them, rebuilding his walls. That was inappropriate. I apologize. It won't happen again. You can't just take it back, she said, her voice shaking with emotion, anger, confusion, hope, fear, everything tangled together. You can't say something like that and then just, I can and I will. His voice was cold now, controlled, back to the Dean Castellano, who ran a criminal empire without flinching. This conversation is over. You can go. But Willow didn't move. She stood there, trembling, her mind racing. Dean wanted her. Not as an employee. He wanted her. And she, God help her, she wanted him too. Had wanted him for months, maybe longer. Since the first time he'd looked at her like she mattered. Like she was more than just another person cleaning his floors. But there was the debt. The crushing, suffocating debt that kept her trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. The secret that would make him see her differently. See her as broken. As someone who needed rescuing. I'll tell you, she said suddenly, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Tonight. I'll tell you everything. Where I've been. Why I'm exhausted. All of it. Dean's eyes snapped to hers, searching. Tonight? Yes, I promise. Just, she swallowed hard, her throat tight. Just give me until tonight, please. He studied her for a long moment, looking for the lie, the deflection. This choice would define the rest of his life. He didn't find one. Okay, he said quietly, and there was so much hope in that single word, it made her chest ache. Tonight. She nodded and turned to leave, her hand on the doorknob when his voice stopped her, soft but insistent. Willow. She looked back, her breath catching at the expression on his face. Don't run from me again, he said, and it wasn't a command. It was a plea. Please. The vulnerability in his voice nearly undid her. He didn't realize this moment would come back to haunt him. She nodded once more and slipped out of the office, closing the door softly behind her. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and tried to catch her breath, tried to process what had just happened. Dean wanted her. Dean wanted her. And tonight, she would have to tell him the truth. About the debt. About the second job. About why she was slowly destroying herself. And then he would either understand, or he would see her as she saw herself weak, trapped, drowning. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, sharp and insistent. She pulled it out with shaking hands, already knowing, already dreading. The message was from an unknown number, but she knew who it was. She always knew. Shift tonight, 11 p.m. Don't be late. You know what happens if you miss a payment. We're not patient people. Willow's stomach dropped like a stone. Hidden in the files was a secret that could destroy them all. No. Not tonight. She'd promised Dean. She'd promised. This was supposed to be the night she finally told him everything. The night she stopped lying. But if she didn't show up for this shift, if she missed this payment, the interest would compound. She'd be even further behind, even more trapped. And the people she owed, they weren't patient, they weren't kind. They were the kind of people who made examples out of those who didn't pay, who didn't care about excuses or circumstances. Her hands trembled as she typed back a response, hating herself with every letter. I'll be there. She deleted the message thread immediately and pocketed her phone, guilt already eating at her like acid. Dean would be waiting tonight. He would expect her to come to him, to finally tell him the truth, and instead, she would be gone. Again, sneaking out to scrub floors in a building across town, trading her exhaustion and her health for a few $100s that barely made a dent in what she owed. But what choice did she have? What other option was there? If the weight of secrets and impossible choices is already crushing your heart, like it's crushing Willow's, if you know what it's like to be trapped between love and survival, hit that subscribe button and join us. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Let's stand together for everyone who's ever had to choose between protecting themselves and protecting their heart. The rest of the day passed in a blur of guilt and anxiety. Willow moved through her tasks mechanically, cleaning rooms that were already clean, organizing spaces that didn't need organizing, anything to avoid thinking about tonight. Every time she caught sight of Dean in the hallway, in his office, standing by the window with that distant, troubled expression, her resolve wavered. She wanted to tell him, God, she wanted to tell him everything. Run to him and confess and let him fix it the way she knew he could. But the fear was stronger. The shame. The knowledge that once he knew the truth about her life, about how completely she'd failed to handle her own problems, he would see her differently. He would see her as weak, as someone who needed saving. And she couldn't bear that. It couldn't bear the thought of him looking at her with pity instead of desire. By 10:30 that night, she was dressed in her second uniform, the one she kept hidden in the back of her closet behind her winter coats. Plain black pants that had been washed so many times they were starting to fade. A gray polo shirt with the cleaning company's logo stitched on the chest. Comfortable shoes with worn soles. She tied her hair back in a practical ponytail and grabbed her bag, moving as quietly as possible through the penthouse. Dean's office light was on. She could see the glow under the door, could imagine him inside, sitting at his desk or standing by the window, waiting for her knock, waiting for her to keep her promise. She didn't knock. Instead, she headed for the service elevator, the one the staff used, the one that wouldn't take her past his office. He trusted her, and that was his biggest mistake. Her heart pounded with every step, guilt and fear warring inside her chest. She was almost there, almost free. Just a few more steps and, going somewhere? She spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Reese stood in the shadows of the hallway, arms crossed, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Reese, she breathed, pressing a hand to her chest. You scared me. You're leaving, he said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. And there was something in his voice, disappointment, maybe, or concern. She opened her mouth to lie, to make up some excuse, then closed it. What was the point? Reese was smart. He'd been watching her, watching Dean. He probably knew more than she thought. Yes. Does he know? No. Reese sighed, a long, weary sound, and ran a hand over his face. Willow, do you have any idea what you're doing to him? I don't have a choice, she said, and hated how weak her voice sounded. There's always a choice. Not for me. Her voice broke, and she had to stop, had to swallow past the lump in her throat. I have to go. I have to make this payment. Reese stepped closer, out of the shadows, and she could see his face clearly now. But there was one thing he didn't know about his closest ally. He looked tired too. Worried. How bad is it? The debt? She didn't answer. Couldn't. If she said it out loud, it would be real. It would be something someone else knew. And then she wouldn't be able to pretend anymore. That bad, Reese muttered, reading her silence correctly. And you've been handling it alone. For how long? 6 months, she whispered. Jesus. Willow. He looked genuinely pained. And you've been working 2 jobs this whole time? No wonder you look like you're about to collapse. I can handle it. No, you can't, Reese said bluntly. And there was no cruelty in it, just honesty. You're exhausted. You're running yourself into the ground. And when Dean finds out, because he will find out, he's not going to be understanding. He's not going to pat you on the back and tell you it's okay. I know, she said miserably. No, you don't. Reese's voice dropped, became deadly serious. When Dean cares about someone and he cares about you, whether he's fully admitted it to himself or not, he doesn't do things halfway. He's all in. Completely. And that means when he finds out you've been lying to him, when he finds out you've been putting yourself at risk and he hasn't been able to protect you, he won't just be mad. He'll be dangerous. Willow's eyes burned with unshed tears. I didn't ask him to protect me. I don't want to be protected. I just want to handle my own problems. Doesn't matter what you want, Reese said, not unkindly. That's who he is. That's what he does. Especially for people he stopped. seeming to think better of whatever he was going to say. "Just be careful, Willow. And maybe prepare yourself for the fallout. Because when this all comes out, it's going to be messy." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Reese looked at her for another long moment, then stepped aside, clearing her path to the elevator. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think you should tell him. I think he deserves to know. And I think you deserve the help." "I'll think about it," she lied. Then she turned and walked to the elevator, her heart breaking with every step. This was only the beginning of a much bigger war. The building she cleaned was in a different part of the city, the part tourists didn't see in their glossy brochures, the part where the lights were dimmer and the streets were emptier and people didn't ask too many questions. It was a 20-story office building that housed various small businesses, accountants, insurance agents, telemarketing firms. Nothing glamorous, nothing that required beauty or presentation, just function. She clocked in with the night supervisor, a man named Marcus who barely looked up from his phone. She grabbed her cart from the supply closet and got to work, her body moving on autopilot. Vacuum, dust, wipe down surfaces, empty trash cans, refill paper towels and soap. Repeat, floor by floor, room by room. The routine was mind-numbing, which was almost a blessing. Her body moved while her mind stayed trapped in Dean's office, replaying his confession. "I want you." She scrubbed harder at a stubborn stain on a desk, trying to erase the memory. But it clung to her like the scent of his cologne, like the warmth of his hand when it had brushed against hers that morning, like the heat in his eyes when he'd looked at her. Hours passed in a blur of chemical cleaners and fluorescent lights. Midnight came and went. Then 1 a.m. She was halfway through the 3rd floor, methodically working her way down the hallway of small offices, when she heard footsteps behind her. Heavy, deliberate, too purposeful to be Marcus checking on her. She turned, expecting maybe a late-working employee or a security guard. It wasn't either. Dean stood at the end of the hallway, still dressed in his white shirt and dark slacks, looking utterly out of place in the dingy office building with its stained carpet and flickering lights. He realized he wasn't alone, someone else had arrived. His jaw was set, his eyes dark with barely controlled fury. And something else, something that looked like fear, like desperation, like a man who'd been pushed past his breaking point. "Dean," she whispered, her heart stopping, the cleaning spray falling from her nerveless fingers and hitting the floor with a clatter. He walked toward her slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. And she saw it all in his face, the anger. Yes, but also the hurt, the betrayal, the fear. "You promised," he said, his voice low and rough and barely controlled. "You promised me tonight. I can explain. I waited for you." He kept coming, eating up the distance between them with measured steps. "I sat in my office for 2 hours, waiting for you to come tell me the truth, checking my watch every 5 minutes like some lovesick teenager. And when you didn't show, when the time kept passing, and you never came, I went looking." He stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating off him, could smell his cologne mixed with the sharp edge of anger. "And you know what I found? Your cleaning cart moved from its usual spot, your room empty, your phone going straight to voicemail. And Reese, who very reluctantly, after I threatened to fire him, told me where you really go at night." Willow's eyes filled with tears, hot and shameful. "I'm sorry." "Sorry?" Dean's voice rose, echoing in the empty hallway. "You're sorry? Willow, do you have any idea what I thought? What went through my head when I realized you were gone again?" His hands came up as if to grab her, to shake her, but he stopped himself, fists clenching at his sides. "I thought something had happened to you. I thought someone had taken you, hurt you. I thought..." His voice broke, and she saw the fear beneath the anger, raw and terrifying. "Why?" he demanded, his voice rough. "Why are you doing this? Why are you working yourself to death in this?" He looked around at the dingy hallway, with barely concealed disgust. "In this place, at these hours, when you already work for me? I don't have a choice," she said, the tears spilling over now. "That's not an answer. That's an excuse. It's the only one I have. No." He grabbed her gently by the shoulders, his grip firm but not painful, forcing her to look at him. Someone in the room was lying, but who? No more deflecting, no more half-truths, no more running. "Tell me the truth, right now. Why are you here?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because once you know, You'll look at me differently. You'll see me as someone who needs to be saved, someone who's weak and pathetic and can't handle her own life. And I can't be that person to you." Dean's expression cracked, the anger giving way to something raw and vulnerable and achingly tender. "Willow," he said softly, his thumbs rubbing small circles on her shoulders. "I already see you, all of you. The strength, the pride, the stubbornness. And nothing you tell me is going to change how I feel about you. You don't know that." "Yes, I do." His hands moved from her shoulders to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears with infinite gentleness. "Tell me, please. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together." And finally, standing in that dingy hallway at 1 a.m. with her cleaning cart abandoned beside her, the dam broke. What she found in the envelope froze her in place. All the fear, all the shame, all the desperate pride that had kept her silent. It crumbled under the weight of his gaze, his touch, his plea. "It's my family," she whispered, her voice breaking. "My brother, Tommy. He got involved with some bad people. Borrowed money he couldn't pay back. A lot of money. For gambling debts. For a business venture that failed. I don't even know all the details. He just kept digging himself deeper." She took a shuddering breath. "And when he couldn't pay it back, when the interest kept compounding and the threats started, they came after my mom. They showed up at her house. Told her they'd burn it down with her inside if Tommy didn't pay." Dean's entire body went rigid, his jaw clenching so hard she heard his teeth grind. But he didn't interrupt, didn't pull away. He just held her face gently and let her continue. "So I made a deal with them. I told them I would take on Tommy's debt. All of it. And I would pay it back, little by little. And they would leave my family alone. Leave Tommy alone. Leave my mom alone." She closed her eyes, unable to bear the look in his. "I've been paying for 6 months, working here 4 nights a week, sometimes 5, trying to make a dent. But the interest keeps adding up, and I can barely keep pace, and I'm so tired. Dean, I'm so tired all the time." "How much?" His voice was deadly calm. "What? How much do you owe?" He enunciated each word carefully, precisely. She opened her eyes, met his gaze. $50,000. Something flickered across his face, pain, anger, calculation. From here on, the rules of the game changed. His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, there was a hardness there that made her shiver. "And you've been working yourself to death trying to pay it off alone. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me. And what? Have you fix it for me? Have you throw money at the problem like I'm some kind of charity case?" She pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. "I don't want to be saved, Dean. I don't want to be someone's project, someone's good deed. I don't want to owe anyone anything more than I already do. This isn't about owing me," he said, his voice rising with frustration. "This is about you destroying yourself for something that isn't even your fault, that isn't even your responsibility. It is my responsibility. I chose to take on the debt. I made that deal. To protect your family. That doesn't make it noble. It makes it my burden to carry." Dean stared at her, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. She could see the war happening inside him. The desire to respect her autonomy versus the need to fix this, to protect her, to make the problem disappear. Then, without warning, he did something completely unexpected, and suddenly, he realized he was being played. He shrugged off his coat, a custom-tailored piece that probably cost more than she made in 6 months, and sat down on the floor, right there in the middle of the dingy hallway, with its stained carpet and flickering overhead lights. "What are you doing?" she asked, bewildered, her voice still thick with tears. "I'm staying," he said simply, looking up at her with absolute determination. "Dean, you can't. I'm not leaving you here alone." His voice was calm now, final. "So either you let me stay while you finish your shift, or you come home with me right now. Those are your only options. This is ridiculous. You can't just sit on the floor of... Watch me." He leaned back against the wall, looking completely incongruous in his expensive clothes and polished shoes, surrounded by industrial cleaning supplies and cheap office furniture. "I'll wait here all night if I have to. You're being irrational. So is working yourself to death for people who are taking advantage of you." His eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "I'm not protecting you, Willow. I'm staying, because you're mine to worry about, whether you like it or not." Her breath caught in her throat. "Yours? Yes." The word was firm, absolute, brooking no argument. Whether you accept it or not, whether you want it or not, you're mine, and I take care of what's mine. She should have argued. Should have told him he was being possessive and controlling and ridiculous. Should have pointed out the dozen ways this was inappropriate, but the exhaustion was too much. The weight of carrying this secret for so long finally breaking her. And underneath all of it, there was something else. A desperate, aching relief that she wasn't alone anymore. That someone knew. That someone cared enough to sit on a dirty floor in the middle of the night just to be near her. I have 2 more hours on my shift, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Then I'll wait 2 more hours. Are you Team Dean for refusing to leave her side? For sitting on that filthy floor in his expensive suit just to make sure she's safe? If this moment hit you right in the heart, subscribe and join our family. Comment where you're watching from. We're all in this together now. And he did. He sat there on the cold floor, his coat folded beside him, his expensive shoes getting scuffed, while she finished cleaning. He didn't complain, didn't check his phone constantly, didn't act like he had somewhere better to be. He just watched her work. His presence a silent promise that she wasn't alone, that he wasn't going anywhere. When her shift finally ended and she clocked out with Marcus, who gave Dean a curious look but wisely didn't comment, they stepped outside into the cool night air. The city was quieter at this hour, the traffic reduced to occasional taxis and late-night delivery trucks. Willow stood on the sidewalk, her whole body trembling from exhaustion, from emotional overload, from the enormity of what had just happened. "I'm so tired, Dean," she whispered, her voice breaking again. "I'm so tired of being scared, of feeling like I'm drowning, of knowing that no matter how hard I work, it's never enough. The payments never make a real dent. The interest keeps piling up, and I can't see a way out." He pulled her into his arms without hesitation, holding her tight against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head while the other wrapped around her waist. Her next words hit him harder than any bullet. She could feel his heart beating steady and strong, could feel the warmth of him seeping into her bones. "I know," he murmured into her hair, his voice soft and infinitely gentle. "I know, sweetheart, but you don't have to do this alone anymore. You don't have to carry this by yourself. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden. You could never be a burden." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his hands framing her face again. "Listen to me. The people who hold your debt, they're predatory. They target desperate people and trap them in cycles they can never escape from. They count on shame and pride to keep people silent, to keep them paying forever. And I won't let them keep you trapped. I won't." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying let me help. No." She shook her head firmly, even as her heart ached to accept. "I can't ask you to do that. It's too much. You're not asking. I'm offering." His voice was steady, certain. "There's a difference. It's the same thing. It's not." His thumbs traced her cheekbones, wiping away the fresh tears that had started to fall. "Willow, I care about you. More than I should, more than is probably smart or appropriate. And watching you exhaust yourself, watching you slip away from me night after night to work yourself to the bone for people who are exploiting you, it's been killing me. Literally killing me. I can't sleep. I can't focus. I can't function knowing you're out here suffering when I have the resources to make it stop." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly it hurt. But the voice in her head, the one that sounded like shame and pride and fear all mixed together, kept whispering that accepting help meant admitting defeat, meant being weak, meant owing him something she could never repay. "I don't know how to accept that," she admitted, her voice small. "I don't know how to let someone help me without feeling like I'm failing." "Then learn," he said softly, intensely. "Learn with me. Let me show you that accepting help isn't weakness, that asking for support isn't failure, that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is trust someone else to carry part of the weight." Standing there in his arms, feeling the steady beat of his heart against hers, she couldn't find the strength to push him away, couldn't find the words to refuse. So instead, she just whispered, "Okay." She felt him exhale, felt the tension leave his body in a rush. "Okay," he repeated, and there was so much relief in that single word it made her chest ache. Then he did something she didn't expect. But what he discovered next changed everything. He pulled out his phone and made a call, right there on the sidewalk, at 2 a.m. "Reese," he said when the call connected, "I need you to pull files on a debt collection operation. Predatory lending, targeting working-class families. I want names, addresses, financial records, everything." A pause. Because I'm about to make a very large problem disappear. Another pause, and Dean's eyes flicked to her, softening. Yes, for her. He ended the call and pocketed his phone, his jaw set with determination. It's done. What's done? Your debt. I'm handling it. By tomorrow morning, you'll be free of this. Dean, you can't just... I can. And I will. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. This isn't up for negotiation, Willow. You can be angry at me. You can hate me for overstepping. You can tell me I'm controlling and high-handed and every other thing I probably am. But I'm not watching you kill yourself for another day when I have the power to stop it. She stared at him, overwhelmed, terrified, grateful, angry, everything all at once. Why? Why would you do this for me? He was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Then, finally, he said the words that changed everything. Because I care about you. More than anyone in this world. More than I've cared about anyone in longer than I can remember. His voice dropped, became raw and honest. And I can't stand by and watch you suffer when I can do something about it. I just can't. The words hit her like a physical blow, stealing the breath from her lungs. She'd known he cared. He'd said as much in his office. But hearing it again, here in the quiet of the night, felt different. It felt real. It felt like a promise. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her eyes filling with tears again. You don't have to say anything. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch achingly gentle. Just let me take care of this, and then we'll figure out the rest. Together, she repeated, testing the word, letting it settle in her chest. Together, he confirmed. And then, because words weren't enough, because they'd both been holding back for too long, she rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, a question. Dean went completely still, as if he couldn't quite believe it was happening, as if he was afraid to move and break the spell. Then his arms came around her, pulling her impossibly closer, and the kiss deepened. It was everything she'd imagined and nothing like it at the same time. It was desperate and hungry, and months of suppressed longing finally breaking free. His hand threaded through her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss further, and she made a small sound against his mouth that seemed to undo something in him. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dean rested his forehead against hers. We should go home, he murmured, his voice rough and affected. Home, she repeated, and the word felt different now, felt right. Not just a place she worked, not just the penthouse, but home, with him. They drove back in his car, a sleek black Mercedes that she'd seen in the garage but never ridden in silence. But it wasn't the uncomfortable silence of before. What followed next was completely unexpected. This was different, charged, full of promise and possibility. Dean's hand found hers across the console, fingers threading together, and they stayed that way the entire drive. When they arrived at the penthouse, Dean led her inside, his hand never leaving the small of her back. In the living room, with the city lights glittering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, he turned to face her, his expression serious. I need you to understand something, he said, his voice steady and certain. What I said earlier about handling your debt, I meant it, but I need you to trust me on this. Trust that I'm not doing it to make you feel obligated or indebted to me in some way. I'm doing it because I want to. Because the thought of you suffering when I can help is unbearable to me. I trust you, she said softly, and realized as she said it that it was true. Despite everything, the power imbalance, the fear, the shame, she did trust him. It's hard for me, accepting help, admitting I can't do everything alone, but I trust you. He exhaled, relief evident in every line of his body. Good, that's good, because there's one more thing I need to tell you, and I need you to trust me on this too. What? His jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes, but he had no idea a bigger force was controlling everything. The people holding your debt, I know who they are. I've been making some calls, pulling some strings, and I know who sent them after your family in the first place. Willow's blood ran cold, her stomach dropping. What do you mean? Who sent them? The whole operation. It's not random. They don't just target anyone who borrows money. They specifically go after people connected to certain organizations, certain families. They use the debts as leverage, as ways to gain information or influence. He paused, his expression darkening. And when Reese pulled the files tonight, when he started digging into who owns the lending company, the name that came up, it was someone in my organization. Someone close. Who? She asked. even though part of her didn't want to know. That's something we'll deal with tomorrow, he said firmly, pulling her close again. Tonight, I just want to focus on you, on us, on the fact that you're finally here, finally telling me the truth, finally letting me in. She wanted to press him, to demand answers. But the exhaustion was catching up to her, the emotional toll of the night finally hitting her all at once. Her knees felt weak, her body heavy. Dean must have seen it in her face because he immediately guided her to the couch, pulling her down beside him. "You're exhausted," he murmured, tucking her against his side. "When was the last time you actually slept?" "Really slept?" "I don't remember," she admitted, letting herself sink into his warmth. "Then rest. Right here. I've got you." And for the first time in months, she did. She let her eyes close, let the tension drain from her body, let herself trust that someone else was watching over her, that she was safe. Dean's hand stroked through her hair in a soothing rhythm, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. But after a few minutes, she forced her eyes open again. There was too much unsaid, too much left hanging between them. "Dean? What happens now? After the debt is paid? After all of this is settled? What are we?" He was quiet for a moment, his hand never stopping its gentle motion through her hair. "What do you want us to be?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know I don't want to go back to pretending, to acting like you're just my boss and I'm just your employee, to keeping distance between us because we're supposed to." "Good," he said, his voice rumbling through his chest. "Because I don't want that either. I want—" He paused, as if choosing his words carefully. "I want you in my life, not as staff, not as someone I'm protecting, but as someone who matters to me, someone I can build something with." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Build something?" "A relationship," he clarified, his arms tightening around her. "If that's what you want, if you're willing to navigate the complications, the power dynamics, all of it, because I know it won't be simple. I know there will be challenges, but I want to try. I want you to be mine in every sense of the word." She pulled back just enough to look up at him, to see the vulnerability in his eyes. "I want that too," she whispered. "I've wanted it for longer than I care to admit, but I was so scared. Scared of the imbalance between us. Scared of what people would think. Scared that if you knew the truth about my life, you'd see me as broken." "You're not broken," he said fiercely. "You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Do you know what it takes to carry the weight you've been carrying? To work 2 jobs? To sacrifice your health and your peace of mind to protect people you love? That's not weakness, Willow. That's courage." Tears spilled over again, but these were different. These weren't tears of shame or fear. These were tears of relief, of finally being seen, of finally being understood. "Don't hold back," she whispered, echoing the words from earlier. "Not anymore. Don't hold back with me." Something in Dean's expression fractured, cracked wide open. For the first time, he wasn't in control. The control he'd been clinging to, the careful distance he'd maintained for months, it all shattered in an instant. He kissed her again, but this time there was nothing tentative about it. This was fierce, possessive, acclaiming. His hands tangled in her hair, his body shifting to cover hers as he pressed her back against the couch cushions. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, his pupils blown wide with desire. "I've been holding back for months," he said roughly, his voice scraped raw. "Trying to be professional, trying to do the right thing, trying to respect the boundaries that should exist between us. But I'm done pretending I don't want this. Want you. In every way possible." "Then stop pretending," she said, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him back down. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And I want this too. I want you." He kissed her again, softer this time but no less intense. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones with infinite tenderness. "Tomorrow," he murmured against her lips. "Tomorrow we'll deal with the debt, with the traitor in my organization, with all the practical realities. But tonight we're just us," she finished, her heart full to bursting. "Just us," he agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "No boss, no employee, no obligations or complications, just 2 people who care about each other." They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped up in each other, the world outside forgotten. Dean's hands traced idle patterns on her back while she memorized the feel of him, the warmth, the solid strength. For the first time in months, maybe years, Willow felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Safe. Free. Home. Eventually, Dean shifted, adjusting their positions so she was tucked more comfortably against his side. "There's one more thing," he said quietly, his voice serious again. "About the debt, and the person in my organization who's responsible." She tensed slightly. "Do I want to know? Probably not. But you deserve to." He took a breath. "It's going to get messy. When I confront them, when I make it clear what they've done, there will be consequences. Serious ones. And I need you to be prepared for that." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that happen when someone betrays me." His voice was cold now, hard. "The kind that serve as a warning to anyone else who might think about crossing me or hurting people under my protection." A shiver ran through her, but not from fear. He couldn't explain why, but danger was closing in. From the realization of exactly who Dean was, what he was capable of when someone threatened what was his. "Will you tell me who it is?" "Eventually, when it's handled. When you don't have to worry about them anymore." His arms tightened around her. "For now, just know that by tomorrow, your debt will be gone. Paid in full. And the people who were holding it over your head will never bother you or your family again. Dean, trust me," he said simply. "Can you do that?" She thought about it. About everything that had happened tonight. Everything he'd said and done. About the way he'd sat on a dirty floor just to be near her. About the way he'd held her while she cried. About the way he looked at her like she was the most important thing in his world. "Yes," she said finally. "I trust you." He kissed the top of her head, his lips lingering. "Good. Now sleep. You need it." "What about you?" "I'll sleep later. Right now I just want to hold you." And he did. He held her while exhaustion finally claimed her, while her breathing evened out and her body relaxed completely for the first time in months. He held her while the city outside slowly began to wake, the first hints of dawn creeping across the skyline. And when Willow finally slept, dreamless and deep, Dean kept watch. He had no idea the night would end in blood. Because that's what you did for the people you loved. You watched over them. You protected them. You made sure they were safe. And God help anyone who tried to take that safety away. If you felt something while watching, please subscribe. That's how I know these stories mean something to you, even on your TV. Take a second to join our community of story lovers. Your support keeps this world of emotions alive.